My pleasure to introduce to you today a wonderful panel that will be joining us. So starting with João Fazendeiro. We also have Amber Paulus. And last but not least, Jacob Benz. Thank you all for being here and looking forward to an engaging and fruitful conversation. So we'll start with you, Amber. When envisioning care for our patients with kidney disease, we can have all the models and policies in place, but transforming kidney health care starts with our patients. And there are health disparities and social determinants of their health that are often not directly addressed by some of these kidney health initiatives. Amber, you were a part of a team that looked into outpatient dialysis patients' social vulnerability and developed an initiative that looked at patient and community-level data to address these. What did you find out, and what advanced research tools did you use to do so?
So I was so impressed that you picked this study, particularly when sharing what you were going to ask us about. So this was published in 2024 in the Nephrology Nursing Journal. And this particular study is when I had like one of those moments where you're like, this is different than I expected. And my perception of my career pivoted. So we did this was a quality improvement study, to clarify. So this was not a research protocol. At the time, I was working as a federal contractor for what is the ESRD networks. And we were covering 3 different networks, so 3, 4, and 5. That's the Mid-Atlantic area, Puerto Rico, and the Virgin Islands included. And about 66,000 patients were included in this cohort. And we were having meetings. So we had survived the initial COVID pandemic, right, so 2022. And CMS dictates through a contract of work metrics that we need to help dialysis facilities in our geographic region improve upon. But we had cyclical meetings, right, and we're all looking at each other like, who has an idea today of what we can do to help stratify the dialysis facility low performers in improving at least X number of percentage points? And we had nothing, right? There was no more interventions. Like we were doing everything we could by clinical practice guidelines. We knew that particular patients had issues. All those things were documented. We knew why the catheters were in place. We knew why home dialysis wasn't going to be an option. We knew why the patient wasn't eligible for transplant. And so I said, there has to be something that's not on the paper, right? And so obviously social factors make an impact. Like we can do 80% of the care wonderfully, and there's another 20% that you can't see in electronic health record because we don't collect it. So the first problem was the data gap. And so we used, University of Wisconsin publishes ADI, the Area Deprivation Index, as a proxy tool to identify vulnerability in the dialysis population. And we looked at that geographically. So we matched zip codes of patients with the ADI tool, which has 17 different components of social risk factors, and flagged patients who were at a certain level of vulnerability by geographic area, looking specifically at a state. So 80% of the population in Puerto Rico, as you can imagine, were living in highly vulnerable populations, followed by Pennsylvania, and then West Virginia, which was surprising to me, which is primarily a very rural state. About 20% of those dialysis recipients were in highly social vulnerable areas. So the take-home message from this project was really 3 key things. One, kind of the purpose of like this experience we're having today is talking about frontline clinicians having unique perspectives that can drive care. If you were to look up this publication, I am not the first author on this publication, but I saw it as an opportunity to champion a social worker who was on our team to give her the belief that she could do something like this. Like we had done really good work, which often stays kind of isolated in your collective teams. And I said, I will go with you and we will write this and share it with everybody. We also presented it at the CMS's Health Equity Conference, I think in 2023. The second thing was that like good ideas happen in these like small spaces. When you have exhausted all traditional approaches, there's someone on the team who has a different idea, and you just got to figure out a way to rally around that. Having data gaps doesn't mean there isn't data available. You just might have to get creative about what you can use. And the third thing was that policy can be a helper. And then things happen and the policy may be taken away. But ESRD QIP did start implementing social determinants of health screening. And if you've seen recently, it's actually being removed from the quality incentive program. You know, all dialysis facilities are kind of held accountable to these reporting metrics and clinical outcomes. And the rationale is that, A, it's burdensome for the clinicians to collect, which I can't argue that it is. And B, that it's not tied to outcomes. So the clarifying message on that is like we have to be able to collect the data to understand what it says before we can start to scale the collection strategy, because it might actually really be impacting outcomes. We just don't have the data to tell us that story.
Oh, that's fantastic, and I was really heartened by your mention of social workers too, because I feel like social workers didn't get much love today. But we are here, and we do value you, and you're an integral part of kidney care across the continuum. So shifting gears to João and in-center hemodialysis units. So while there are protocols in place for in-center dialysis care, some of them we're familiar with in the United States as medical directors, rounding physicians, and nurses, the complexity of these processes and the importance that each cog in that wheel be oiled and functional is what allows this wheel to turn. Now, you are part of a team that took a deep dive into improving the safety and quality of hemodialysis sessions through creating a 15-point checklist. Can you share with us what some of these points were and how their implementation affected the overall quality and safety of treatment delivery?
Thank you for having me here. It's curious that you bring this study, and I will explain. It's a very relatively old study, but it somehow the open of the Pandora box for us. We pick up three main moments of the dialysis treatment, patient dialysis treatment. So before we did the pre-checks, safety pre-checks, immediately at the connection and after the connection. And why Pandora box? Because we were able to identify the most fragile aspects of the process. And with it, we open our eyes to identify, for instance, one of the points were cannulation, success of cannulation. And this was an opening of our eyes to improve the cannulation method. And we still have it in place, and if we have time, I will speak just a little bit about what we did regarding cannulation. But another very important and relevant aspect that for the nurses are important is how we classify the dialyzer in the end of the treatment. Visually, if we have too many fibers clotted or not. And we did also a research in which we looked to that. We published it in Hemodialysis International, and we noticed that there is a relation, an important relation, between the amount of fibers coated in the end of the treatment and the patient outcomes. And this was a trigger for the nephrologists to fine-tune the heparinization in the end, or the anticoagulation. So, not expected a question, but a very welcomed one.
Thank you. No, absolutely. I mean, I figured that's kind of like the pivot because it's relevant to really everybody here in the room, especially those who take care of dialysis patients, to kind of understand the different steps, and then that's when you identify the issue. And I'm glad you mentioned self-cannulation because, funnily enough, we had a staff meeting. I'm the medical director of one of the dialysis units, and in that meeting, we had an open and honest conversation with the staff, and I was surprised to to hear from the staff that they wanted more learning on cannulation. You take it for granted as medical director that, the nurses know how to cannulate, this is not a problem, right? This is ABC for them, and then we move forward, right? From a physician's perspective, we just, take that for granted. But the fact that they were honest and asked for better training on cannulation kind of goes to your point about identifying issues, and you won't know unless you target it, right? So have you been using this checklist now in the dialysis units today in Portugal, and have they been adopted?
Not exactly the same, yeah, but with same adaptations, we are still using it, and this is because we're still using it that we improve the nursing process, but not only the nursing process, the whole treatment process, the must cannulation, so that kind of cannulation that we are doing now and are gaining traction all over the world, at least in some continents like Europe, APAC. There are some interest in US as well. It's a kind of cannulation with 3 spots. It's an hybrid technique. 3 spots for the arterial, 3 spots for venous. Each day of the week, you use the same spot. On Monday, you use one, Wednesday another, Friday another. And what we came out with this different approach is that we have less infections than butanol. Good. It is easier to implement and is easier to get the commitment of the staff than rope ladder. And we are already having some important data regarding the reduction of aneurysmatic dilation in the patients, even already installed aneurysms. And if we are doing something good, then we have to promote it and train the people on it.
Absolutely, absolutely. No, I'd love to hear it, and very important. Now, Jacob, you have a very interesting background, given your both personal and professional now experience to kidney care, and then you're a health informatics graduate with SQL and have a special interest in predictive analytics. How have you leveraged your background in your role as a certified clinical hemodialysis technician?
Well, on a more emotional level than I feel like a lot of the other discussions that have happened up here, going through it myself and also struggling along with the people I give care to every other day, you just really get to learn them and learn what got them to that point. And everyone always says the same thing. Every time I talk to them and it's their first treatment on there, they always say, "I wish I would have known." And that's like an avenue that I think I really see predictive analytics answering moving forward in the future. But on a more emotional note, I'd say it's a good and a bad character trait of mine, but I'm a bit of a vengeful person. Me going through a bilateral hydronephrosis from the time I was born to 14, it really changes your perspective, given that, your childhood is supposed to be some of the best years of your life. But for me, that was some of the most trying experiences that I've had, and to get out of that and then get into a field where I'm encountering that again and seeing the same faces that I felt when I was going through it, it has lit a fire under me, and it's a bit of a vengeful one.
Absolutely. I'm sorry about the experience. Sometimes it takes a little bit of anger to get stuff done afterwards, right?
Anger isn't a bad emotion. It really drives you.
Yeah. All right. Now I'm gonna jump around a little bit with the order of the questions that I was going to ask, just for time constraints. But this is a question for everybody on the panel, and so we'll go in order. But the focus of today's symposium is really harnessing the power of research, AI, and innovation. And how does each of you envision AI implementation assisting you in your respective roles within kidney care? So, João, we'll start with you.
For me, it's not anymore a vision. It's somehow part of our daily practice and part of our projects. I have the privilege to work with Lucanari in a collaborative work for a predictive model regarding failure of vascular access, and it was a success. But more than just that, we are now, my team and I, we are working on a model that, starting from natural language, you could support the nurses. I'm talking about the nurses because I am a nurse. We can support the nurses on the care planning, nursing diagnosis, as well as nurses intervention. But I think we should point, it was already mentioned today, but I think we should point something very important, in my opinion. It is not a barrier of the implementation. It's not a barrier, but I would like to raise a point of awareness. AI tools must be designed to serve all the healthcare professionals, the nurses, physicians, all the professionals, not the other way around. So the critical judgment of the nurses and other professionals must remain respected and uncompromised. This is critical for me. And just as importantly, these technologies should be developed with the end users, not for the end users. So in the end, I know it's a buzzword today, but I have to mention it again. Co-creation is key to trust the tools for in healthcare field. Co-creation, not for the nurses, not for the physicians, with the nurses and with the physicians. Sorry, I took too much time.
No, very important point. No, to hammer home. Amber.
It's simple. The answer is one word, 4 letters, data. So a lot of my time is spent in creating data pipelines that feed kind of this research consortium that we've established at Virginia Commonwealth University, and harmonizing discrete data, which is quite easy to work with. Everything has its own little fit, and it's all structured the exact same. Unstructured data is like the playground where you try and figure out how do you leverage text notes to actually tell a story. And then we have feed-in data. So in our electronic health record, a lot of things are fed in through external entities, like histology reports, molecular diagnostics, the way that cardiology actually reads some of the echoes, like that's all PDF reports. And so finding ways to harmonize all of that so we can create machine learning models that allow us to answer questions that we have clinically.
Just to piggyback off of that, I'd say, I'm someone who got to go through school right when AI was starting to kick off, and you start seeing people use ChatGPT and whatnot on their assignments, like the educators before me spoke about. And at the end of the day, I think the biggest issue in implementing AI into clinical practice is ultimately having the balanced view of it. You have people on one side who don't believe that it belongs in care facilities whatsoever, and then you have people who are over-trusting of it. I'd like to give a simple statistical metaphor. Say, as a clinician, you have a 90% chance of success when diagnosing someone with chronic kidney disease. That's a 90% chance. Now, let's say you have a model that can maybe spit out with 95% accuracy diagnoses. Now, if you just looked at one and not the other, you'd either have 90 or you would have 95. But when you use both of them together, it takes 2 things to mess up for something to go bad. And having AI as a safety net rather than the driver behind what it is that you are doing in the care facility, I think is ultimately the main message.
Yeah, very important message. I know we touched a little bit on, the personal side of things for you, Jacob, but I think we're just gonna, discuss it, I think, for everyone, because I know each one of you has a journey that led them to where they are today to get you on this stage, right? And you're all a very diverse group of individuals, each working within your roles to better kidney care for patients. Not in a silo, like you said, João, right? But the goal is to get there together. So briefly, can you share with us your journey that got you onto this stage today so that those in the crowd who are aspiring to be more engaged in the kidney care can perhaps use your stories as an inspiration for themselves and their journeys? João.
Yeah. Okay. I'm based in Portugal. I started my career more than 35 years ago in a cath lab. And 1 year later, I stay in the cath lab, but I also started in dialysis field. And I was working in both fields during 17 years, more or less. It was a complementary work. I learned a lot about vessels, fistulas, and so on. So it was good. 18 years ago, I decided to dedicate myself exclusively to dialysis, and I create what I could acknowledge as a very robust team in Portugal, and we do lots of research. We published several papers in indexed magazines. We present in several congresses, mainly international, but we try always to have meaningful things to show, something with application to practice, because we notice that this is the main driver for our staff. Academia, yes, as much as possible, but with application to practice. On top of this, or the cherry for me, and the experience of my life, working on Marielka's team, I had the privilege to support the opening of 2 clinics in a very demanding environment in Lebanon, one in the south, in the remote area, very dangerous, to tell the truth, and another one in the north. It was probably the experience of my life, but we succeed. We provide care to those people, because we are talking about people that was in need of this kind of treatment. It was very rewarding. And I also support the opening of the first Fresenius Medical Care Clinic in Riyadh, Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, still working and successfully working.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yeah,
Amber.
simple. It's about relationships. Like everything that's ever happened to me in my career has always been because I have been surrounded by incredible people who helped me get there. And now I also try and do that for others who are kind of on their journey at different stages.
Yeah, the way I go through life is I pick up little bits of inspiration along the way as I go. And just being a renal patient myself, when I exited college and didn't really know what to do, I was like, you know what, let's jump back into it. Let's see what the renal life is like. You know, helping those people out got me to the point where I'm like, you know what, I think I want to give the big data side of things a try, and that's where I am now. There's a lot of uncertainty that goes along in that journey. You're not sure if things will be promised to you along the way, or if you'll even end up in a spot that you're happy with, but as long as you keep putting one foot in front of the other and working towards a goal that feels worthy to you, you can't lose, in my opinion.
Absolutely. Thank you all so much for sharing your insights. I'm sure we all learned a lot. Thank you. Appreciate it.